Funding for the art show was made possible by Montgomery County Arts and Cultural District, the Virginia W. Kettering Foundation, proud supporter of the arts in our community, and viewers like you. Thank you.
In this edition of the art show, this special effects artist got his start with pumpkins. Stories through signs. Light and sound converge into art. And visit a living memorial to the Holocaust. It's all ahead on this edition of The Art Show. Hello, I'm Rodney Veal, and welcome to The Art Show, where each week we showcase local and regional and national artists and arts organizations. West Carrollton resident Ben Peter is making a name for himself in the special effects industry. He competed in Season 8 of the Sci-Fi Channel's reality TV show Face Off, leaving just a few episodes from the finale. When not applying makeup, he's exploring sculpture techniques and rediscovering his love of all things art.
I like to work with my hands as much as possible. My favorite thing to do is the sculpting aspect, building a character, and then seeing it come to life as you work on it is one of my favorite things. I was watching a TV show and saw a guy named Ray Villafane, and he was carving pumpkins. And I figured if he could do it, you know, it looks pretty simple, I could probably do it too. I would probably buy 3 pumpkins a week and just try and do what I could with them. I wanted to try and make my pumpkins look more realistic. And so I went to cinema makeup school to try and figure out the symmetry of the nose and the face and the eyes and the lips, and kind of got sucked into the industry from there. For being a special effects artist, you really are a multimedia artist. You do the sculpting, the drawing, the conceptual designing, having the understanding of how to kind of create something three-dimensionally in a drawing really helps you into the next step, which would be the sculpting. If you understand it on 2 dimensions, as you're working in 3 dimensions, it's a lot easier to push something back or pull something forward. So they really go hand in hand with that. Prosthetics are pretty much used for all the special effects industries. You start out with a life cast, which is the copy of, you know, somebody's face, whoever it is that you're going to be making the prosthetic for. And it's a stone copy, and then you'll sculpt the clay over the top of that, and then you'll make a mold, which is a copy of your sculpt, really. I've got a cake mixer, which is for making the foam latex. You got to whip it up because it's like a 4-part batch. Once you pour latex into the mold, you throw it in the oven. Once you take it apart, if you've done everything correctly, your prosthetic should pull out nice and easy. So if you look at movies, some of the main characters have different facial features than what you would expect, or even TV shows like Star Trek. You know, all these different aliens that are up in space, all of those had to be prosthetics. So for the industry, it's a well-utilized tool. Knowing how to paint, you can actually take a bad sculpture and make it look really pretty with just paint. Women do it every day when it comes to beauty makeup. It's called contour and shadowing. So it's the perfect example. You have to really understand pigments and skin tones and layers. You don't just use a skin tone, base tone, and you're done with it. You know, you'll never get the realism of actual skin. Since there's blood flowing through our skin, you start out with a pink tone, and then you can go through and put lighter tones over the top of it, and then you've got your eye bags or skin imperfections, freckles. So that pretty much just comes down to paint and being able to know what color to use and at what layer to use it at is really the important part as the special effects artist, because anybody can just take and throw paint on something, but to have it look realistic when it's just a piece of foam is really the trick. I like changing the facial structures and body structures, because to completely change it and make it look like it belongs there, give them a big jaw or a big nose or, big ears with big horns or something, and to make it look right, it's not easy. My biggest challenge as a special effects artist would pretty much be the concept designing. As a designer, you really have to think of certain things, like how old is that cut? Is it an infected cut? What kind of a cut is it? Is it cut with a knife or is it a gash? What is their skin type like? All those different things that have to be put into the design, the very beginning workings of it before you can even sculpt anything, before you can paint it or apply it or anything. As a special effects artist, I challenge myself with making sure that I think of those details before somebody else. I think special effects is just another avenue of art. I know that I can sculpt and I can paint and I can do all these things. Well, now I can sculpt something, make it, and then apply it to someone's face, paint it, and create something completely different that'll actually walk around and talk to you and interact with you. And I think that's a valuable skill, especially with computers nowadays. Everybody wants to CG everything with green screens or blue screens, whatever. And to have that practical effects that you can walk up and touch something and, be a part of it is what I think is really important. There are potential opportunities here in Dayton as far as movies, and the thing that I'm probably going to try and focus on the most is my own personal art, doing my own kind of sculptures and recreating things. Sometimes it's hard, but you make time for it because it's a passion.
Ben is very active on Twitter. Say hello and follow him at Benjamin J. Peter 1. Visit thinktv.org and click on the Art Show for more details. Have you ever really paid attention to the signs you see every day? Signs not only show us the way and invite us in, or not, they tell stories, rich stories about the history, technology, commerce, and culture of our communities. Since 2005, Cincinnati's American Sign Museum has offered a permanent home to hundreds of signs that may have otherwise been lost forever.
One of our taglines for the museum is this is a walk down memory lane. When people come here, they go, oh, I remember, and then fill in the blank. And the positive thing about that is it always conjures up good memories. We're really the only public sign museum in the country that covers the full range of American signage. We get a lot of support from the sign industry, where a sign company will take down a local sign. They'll send me a quick email, and before they haul it off to the scrapyard, they say, you have any interest in this sign? Increasingly, and perhaps unfortunately, we've acquired signs from small businesses that are closing down. One way to keep alive the memory of the family business is to have the sign come here. We actually have about 4,400 items in the collection, of which about 600 are signs. About half of those 600 signs are on display. We also have a photo archive of 1,200 images of signs, about 700 books and catalogs, artwork, blueprints, sign sketches. We have tools and equipment, so it runs the whole gamut of any type of object related to sign making and design. Upon entry at the museum, we start with our letter walls to show how the materials and technologies used to make three-dimensional letters has changed through time. Laying over top of that is kind of a history of electric signs. We start about the late 1800s, I'd say 1880, 1890, up through about the late 1960s. You're going to see hand-painted signs, gold leaf on glass, hand-lettered show cards, the whole gamut of American signage. You tour the beginning of the museum, you see the signs out of context. They're mounted to the floor, mounted to the wall, hanging from the ceiling. You don't have any context of scale or how they would have fit on the building. So when you walk out on signs on Main Street, each storefront is actually designed around a sign we have. So it provides us the opportunity to put a 50s sign on a 50s building, a 1920s sign on a 1920s building, a turn-of-the-century sign on a turn-of-the-century building. You can walk through the museum and take it from a standpoint of the history of technology, the advent of electricity and light bulbs, the advent of light bulb signs, the advent of plastic after the war, the advent of plastic signs. You can also walk through the museum as a history of design trends. I can cite various design trends in the US through signage. And then it's also the history of advertising. Signs are everywhere, but people don't really think about them in the context that somebody had to design that, somebody had to make that, take a picture in their head and make it real.
I am a neon tube bender. That's what they call us in the trade. We bend glass for neon signs. We also process the neon tube to create a vacuum tube, and we have to put the filler gas in, which is either neon gas or argon gas. A neon tube is basically a hollow tube that has an electrode on each end. The fluorescent powder determines the color inside the tube. In conjunction with the filler gas, either the red neon gas or the blue argon gas. The filler gas inside acts as like a wire in between these two electrodes, and so there's no little wire filament to burn out. That's one of the reasons they can last for decades, if it's well made. Our sign's been going since 1991, so that's pretty good for a light bulb. I have a blow hose. When I bend in the fire, it's going to have a tendency to get misshapen. So what I want to do is I want to blow just a little puff of air in there just to keep it nice and round through the bend. We're adjacent to the American Sign Museum. We have this great bank of windows here where people can watch us bend glass. We've met people from all over the world, and everybody seems to be very excited about seeing neon made. It is becoming somewhat of a lost art. There used to be a lot of training programs around back in the 40s and 50s where they would train people for the sign business, and traditionally a lot of people have learned through a family business. So that's traditionally the way something like this would be handed down. We have people all the time asking about it. We're going to have to pass this on to somebody. I love what I do, and I really enjoy being part of the museum experience. To look out this window that we have right next to our shop, it is pretty inspirational because the engineering that goes into some of those signs is quite amazing. There's a lot of things that they've done through history with the neon that we don't do anymore, as far as the movement and the flashing. You get a lot of fun signs out there that you forget from the past, like the Howard Johnson with Simple Simon met a pieman on his way to the fair. That's all depicted on top of that sign. And that's something that I had forgotten about until they put that sign into the museum.
The thing I like most about the Sign Museum is the way it connects so successfully to people. Anybody of any age that goes there has a hook. They see something that's part of their life, it resonates with them, and they love to tell you about it or experience it. Signs are the most transient part of our built environment. They change at a pace much faster than buildings, than streets, than landscapes, because when a building goes, the sign that advertised that building might be not only irrelevant, but confusing. So they go away. It's a very important part of our culture and our lives. And when people go into the Sign Museum, they have this almost reverberation with their own history, their own identity, because they're seeing so many parts of it in this condensed, hyper amped up environment. What's unique about the Sign Museum is they are a national institution which is collecting these really important artifacts from our built environment and interpreting them in a way that is really fun and educational. The first job of a sign designer or maker is to be visible, to stand out, to have a visual presence in the environment. And so they've always used the technology that's available to them to do that, from streamers with reflections to whirligigs, blowing in the wind and capturing reflected light. As soon as something's existed, they've incorporated it into signs. Gold leaf, gas illuminated signs, punching holes in metal with light bulbs behind them. And then, of course, you get to the point where it's neon. And neon was extremely effective at standing out, particularly at night. Signs have evolved with us as a culture from being very simple things that would be hand-lettered on a building to stamped out, mass-produced items that can be shipped out by the thousands. We're losing a lot of individual character and a lot of spontaneity in our visual environment. It's one of the reasons the Sign Museum is so important, because it captures that when it was a free-for-all and everyone was out there creating their own message. And having a record of that is an extremely important cultural archive that people can go to, not to mention that it's a lot of fun.
The American Sign Museum is located in the Camp Washington neighborhood of Cincinnati, just off 75. Log on to thinktv.org and click the art show for details.
My work has been called architectonic, which sort of figures since I'm a retired architect. But I'm inspired by all sorts of things, both nature and buildings and things which I see through the experiences which I've had. I use the facility at Rosewood Arts Center, the open studio, and do all my work here. I'm currently working on pieces which have boats in them. This section here is under construction. It's a series of buildings, and these will eventually be put on a boat, and the name of the piece will be City on the Move. This particular finished piece here, that piece is called Ahoy Captain Hook. This is my take on the Peter Pan legend. It's Ahoy Captain Hook.
We want to introduce as many local artists to the community as we can. So, email us a short video like the one you just saw, and maybe we'll give you a quick shout out. It doesn't have to be professional. Shoot it on your tablet if you want. Just show us your studio and some examples of your work. In this next segment, we meet up with artist Dorothy Tanner at her Denver studio. Since the 1960s, Tanner has been crafting breathtaking sculptures using light. We take a look at her light and sound creations for one mesmerizing multi-sensory experience.
Light defines reality. Light defines who you are, what you look like.
Dorothy Tanner began harnessing light to create her art in the 1960s. While the shimmering quality the light has on the work is visually captivating, Tanner explained she wants her work to engage more than the eye. She uses art, in her words, to control the tyranny of a logical mind.
There was a certain dissatisfaction with living the usual artist's life, which is to produce work and then run around and get yourself recognized and go through the whole business of it. It was not what art meant to me. I wanted it to be more than that. I'm not interested, in one sense, in what I know. I'm interested in what I don't know, in what can be discovered in the process of creating something with light, and to discover what it is that I'm really thinking or what I'm really feeling. I very often will start with a piece of material that's left over from another sculpture. You need to play with the material and to play with light and to discover it. That interests me. I followed through with a drawing, which is much less satisfying to me.
Tanner explained she soon discovered something that is satisfying to her and critical to her continued evolution as an artist.
We began to do performances with overhead projectors. We created sculptures with light. We bring in musicians. Music has the ability, sound has the ability, as does light, to transport you to other realms. When you put people into a comfortable state and you address them sensually through their audio facilities, through their vision without intellectualizing, you free them from their usual inner dialogue. It elevates them. I am doing it to get them to feel good, to get them to take a vacation from themselves. People come back and they tell me they have never seen anything like it. They're very transported by having been here. It's very gratifying to me to have people so delighted, so appreciative. Art should do whatever the artist feels is true and honest to himself. I'm kind of demanding in that respect that it be a reflection of where I am, who I am.
Did you miss an episode of The Art Show? No problem. You can watch it on demand at thinktv.org. You'll find all of the previous episodes, as well as current episodes and links to the artists we feature. Finally tonight, we visit the Museum of Jewish Heritage in New York. We take a look at its core exhibit, which provides an intimate appreciation for the artistic talents and drive of those living in Nazi concentration camps during the Holocaust.
My name is David Marwell, and I'm the director of the Museum of Jewish Heritage, a living memorial to the Holocaust. The original building of the museum was completed in 1997, and the Robert M. Morgenthau Wing was completed in September 2003. Our mission is to teach people of all ages and backgrounds about 20th and 21st century Jewish history and the Holocaust. The core exhibition, which is composed of 3 floors, the first floor, without any foreshadowing, talks about life before the Holocaust, beginning in about 1880 with a great migration of Jews. The second floor deals with the Holocaust itself. And the third floor deals with this remarkable story of the rebirth of life and community following great tragedy. The first thing that a visitor sees when they enter our core exhibition is 2 quotes from the Bible. This is not an exhibition that's about death. It's about life and death. It's about the past, and it makes you think about the future because of the hope that it inspires. We tell this history from a Jewish perspective. So instead of saying, this is what the Nazis did to the Jews, which is the narrative structure of many Holocaust museums, our narrative structure is, this is what happened to me, to my family, to my community, to my people. So the story is told in the first person through the testimony of individuals who lived the history. Anyone dealing with Holocaust education has to confront the time which is coming within the next decade or two when there will be no one left alive who experienced the events of the Holocaust themselves. The gallery educators that our visitors encounter here, many of them are survivors, and that gives a tremendous power to the way we approach this history. Then there are also objects. These are a different kind of survivor. People come face to face with objects that were important to individuals at the time of the history we're telling. And they can look at that object and imagine the role it played and lend to it their own sense of empathy. We have, for instance, the trumpet that was played by a Dutch musician named Louis Bennett. He played this in the orchestra at Auschwitz, and it saved his life. And you can imagine it in his hands. You can imagine him blowing through the mouthpiece and understand the role that that played in saving him. Any museum that deals with the Holocaust has to approach the question of the scale of what happened. We have, thanks to the very careful, creative, and passionate work of a French Jewish lawyer named Serge Klarsfeld, the photographs of some 2,000 individuals who were deported from France to Auschwitz, most of whom died. There are 6 pillars, and each one has several hundred photographs on them. And we have a book that allows you to locate that person's name. And it's very important for the public to see these people not as victims, but as living people with varied and vibrant lives. And by showing that, you have some way of getting at, approaching, hinting at the impact of the Holocaust, because you're not simply seeing the number 6 million, you're seeing a small sample of that 6 million, but in the context of their lives. The Voices of Liberty is one of my favorite installations at the museum. It's located on the 3rd floor of the museum, and one can see the Statue of Liberty out in the harbor. And we said, what if we allowed the public to take in this view, but at the same time, hear stories of people seeing the Statue of Liberty for the first time?
What I really remember very vividly is the mist, and mysteriously the Statue of Liberty just appearing as a colossus.
It was freedom. It was beautiful.
My mother broke out the first pair of long pants so I would not get off the ship in lederhosen.
The only country I was accepted in was here, and it's a beautiful country.
Even though much of it is about the Jewish experience, the Voices of Liberty tells a completely universal story about leaving home and coming to a new place. The Garden of Stones is an art installation by Andy Goldsworthy, the great British artist. It's composed of 18 large boulders. The largest one, I think, weighed 30,000 pounds when it was first brought here. Each of the stones has been hollowed out, filled with earth, and from each stone, a dwarf chestnut oak tree grows. The metaphor here is that life can take root and flourish even in the most unforgiving and unlikely circumstances. We conceive of this museum as a living memorial because what we do each day is to teach people and to provide a place where people can come, learn, reflect, and contemplate an important and difficult history within the context of the history that came before and after.
And that wraps it up for this edition of The Art Show. Until next time, I'm Rodney Veal, and thanks for watching.